This podcast episode entails a discussion about suicide. If you or someone else you know is experiencing thoughts about self-harm or suicide, please call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. That is 1-800-273-8255. Or you can text 741-741 to reach a trained counselor. Additionally, Cal State East Bay's Student Health and Counseling Center has a list of resources that anyone can check out. This includes safety plans to allow someone to remember their resources and coping strategies when in a crisis. Thank you so much for listening.
Join us for episode 3, centered around the topic of mental health, featuring an interview with former pro skater John Rattray, led by the executive director of Skate Like a Girl, Kristin Ebeling.
This is MaKenna Duda, your host. I'm a Cal State East Bay alum, former collegiate, now recreational runner, and I just recently earned my bachelor's degree in kinesiology. Here, we'd like to serve our audience by educating and also inspiring y'all to feel empowered through sport, social justice, and skateboarding. All athletes, skateboarders, and fans of sport and social justice are welcome. Like a Girl and the Center for Sport and Social Justice at Cal.
To kick off today's episode, let's take a few minutes to be mindful. I'd like to share a tip from Dr. Jenny O, an associate professor of kinesiology at California State University, East Bay, specializing in learning and performance psychology. Imagine this. You just finished a run at Lake Chabot. It's really hot outside. The sun is beaten. You can feel your t-shirt sticking to your body. You're dripping with sweat and breathing pretty hard. You're leaning over a bench, stretching your legs, when a really fit person stops beside you to take a drink from their water bottle. They look at you and say, "Wow, you're sweating like crazy. You look really gassed." They then smile and continue on their way. Take a second and think. How would you interpret what the person just said to you? What do you think they meant? Most people have a framing tendency. We tend to interpret information and experiences in either a positive, neutral, or negative light. Some people will have interpreted what the other runner said in a positive way, perhaps thinking, "Cool, they can tell I was working hard," or "I must have had a really good run." Other people may have taken what they said just as neutral information. "Yep, I am sweating and I am gassed." Others, however, may have interpreted what was said negatively. They are saying, "I'm fat and out of shape." These 3 possible interpretations are in response to the exact same experience. Someone saying, "Wow, you're sweating like crazy. You look really gassed." Based on the situation described, you can't actually know for sure what the person actually meant when they said these words. You just placed meaning on what they said based on your framing tendency. This really highlights the power of personal perceptions when it comes to our ability to stick to and get the most from health behaviors and routines, especially when we're just starting out with them. Cognitive behavioral scientists and kinesiology have studied various ways in which the mind and the body work together to influence if, when, and how we move. One thing we know is that people with more positive or neutral framing tendencies tend to have better adherence, effort, and yes, success within a given sport or exercise context. Why? What we think about sometimes influences how we feel about the situation and about ourselves in that situation, which then influences our decision to put ourselves in that situation again and how we will act in that situation in the future. So, if you have negative thoughts and interpretations about something, an example is, "That run sucked. It was so hard. I can't do this." It is going to make you feel negative emotions. Example, anxiety, shame, uncertainty, which then is going to lead to a less than ideal behavioral choice or choices because you want to avoid experiencing those negative feelings in that situation in the future. Next time, you may choose to run slower, a shorter distance, or you may choose to make the chances 0% that you will experience those negative feelings again after a run because you're not going to run again at all. The good news is that if you are a person who tends to interpret things negatively, you can use this negative framing tendency with intentional and consistent mental management using the CRTC method. C, catch yourself making a negatively framed interpretation. Wow, I can't believe I am so winded. I am so out of shape. R, reinterpret the situation in either a neutral or positive way. Yeah, I'm breathing hard, but that just means I worked hard enough to actually benefit from my run. T, take note of how you feel now that you have reinterpreted the situation. Perhaps you feel proud or energized. C, commit to what you'll do next time. Next run, I'm going to run at least as hard as I just ran, if not, a little bit harder. Using the CRTC method consistently over a period of a few months can help you rewire your brain such that you become a person who interprets things more neutrally or even positively, who experiences less negative and more positive emotions, and who makes better and more effective behavioral choices to enhance their own personal health and wellness. Give it a try. When participating in a sport, your physical body is in use, but so is your mind. They're interconnected. Some positive benefits in choosing to play a sport include improved concentration, regular goal setting and readdressing, plus an acquisition of discipline within a structured setting. It is when there's a disconnect between the body and the mind when sport can reap its consequences. Think about eating disorders and disordered eating, poor body image, and lack of confidence. Hence, bridging the gap between physical and mental toughness by not only providing tools to create a fit body, but a fit mind is so important. Let's make sport a positive vessel for implementing a beautiful change within society to support athletes and their mental health alongside their physical health.
What's up, everybody? Fans and friends of sports, social justice, skateboarding, and all that. I am Kristin Ebeling, she and her pronouns. I'm the executive director of Skate Like a Girl, and I have the pleasure of hosting my good friend, John Rattray, today here on the pod. So a little bit about John. John is a former professional skateboarder from Aberdeen, Scotland. In his early 20s, John rode for the legendary Blueprint skateboards before making the big move to California, where he joined the handrail chomping, gap slaying crew over at Jamie Thomas's Zero skateboards. If you're not a skater, you just got to trust me. Zero was like the coolest brand in the early 2000s. Like everybody was obsessed with Zero, and it's just so iconic. So yeah, he's a big deal in skating. And anyways, a decade passed filled with video parts, tours, signings, photos, interviews before John's sister tragically took her own life. This event prompted him to quit being a pro skater. In 2017, 6 years after his sister passed, when the searing, gut-wrenching pain of losing someone so close to you had finally settled in a little, Rattray embarked on an annual fundraising quest for mental health in memory of his sister, Katrina. So John, welcome to the pod. Where are you joining us from today?
Thanks, Kristin. I am in Portland, Oregon, southeast Portland.
Awesome. How's the weather down there? Is it looking better this springtime, or what's the facts?
It's been really beautiful the last few days. It's chilled down a little bit. There's a bit of clouds coming in. I think it's going to rain for a few days now, but then it will open up again and should be nice. But yeah, it got warm. So starting to see those summer days starting to creep back in. Nice.
Gotta love it. So let's get things started here. What sport are you not good at, but wish you were, and why?
Yeah, thanks for sending those questions ahead of time so I could give like a few minutes thinking. I'm not really too bothered about being good at sports in general. I tried going running the other day for some reason, just because I feel like I have to get some cardio, get the blood flowing, and I'm not managing to ride my bike as much as I'd like. It was really bad running. It's terrible. I was going I was like listening to the guided run, and I was going to this pace that I felt like was doable. But then the guide said, like, if you are not feeling good right now, you need to back off your pace. Just back off. This is not a run for like trying to beat records or set time. This is about just having a good time running. And I was thinking to myself, yeah, it feels terrible. But then I backed off, and the only place I could back off to was just walking again. I was just walking. I was like, that's how slow my pace was. So that's where I'm at with that. In terms of a sport I'd want to be good at, I think I've always thought gymnastics is pretty awesome, but the rigor that you need to go through to like get really good at that is just off-putting. So yoga, I think yoga is where I landed. Like, I think if I could get really good at yoga, that would be kind of awesome because of what it does to for the subject we're talking about today, for what it does to like your physical health and gets things flowing, gets the blood flowing, and your lymph system moving and all that. I think that would be one that I would like to get back into and practice regularly and get good at.
Yeah, I know I'm slipping on my yoga game when my like backbonelesses are looking too stiff.
Exactly. And certain moves, like I don't know, I used to be able to stalefish pretty damn good, and I don't even know if I can get there anymore.
That's a reach.
Yeah.
For anybody out there that doesn't skate, stalefish is basically taking one of your hands and reaching down in between your feet, but kind of down by your heels is the amount of stretch you got to do. Yeah, behind you. Yeah. So it's quite a stretch.
You have to contort your legs a certain way so that you can get into the position you need to be in. Yeah, it's one for the more limber people out there. I'm not quite.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I find running really hard as well. I think just because of years of skating. I don't know if I just feel it in my knees and my ankles so bad.
Yeah. I didn't even feel like I didn't twist my ankle or anything, but when I woke up the next day, my ankle was really sore from running. It's like, and I was wearing some running shoes, which are supposed to have, they protect you a little bit, but I think the old body just is not cut out for it. Oh, there's the dog, of course.
Got a furry friend over there. Awesome. So John, I know you've done a lot of work with Mental Health First Aid, which is a national program to teach the skills to respond to the signs of mental illness and substance abuse. I actually attended this training with you a few months back that you helped put together for some key folks in the skateboarding community. Can you tell us a little bit about Mental Health First Aid and why it's important to you?
Yeah, let's see. I mean, Mental Health First Aid it's a curriculum, I think was originally developed in Australia, and then it's been adopted, certainly in the United Kingdom. The NHS uses the Mental Health First Aid curriculum. And in the United States, the same or very similar curriculum is handled by the National Council of Behavioral Health. And it's essentially just it's a tool that you can use to kind of understand the various ways that mental health issues, problems, and crises will present so that you can be more observant. And then there's a 5-point action plan that they have. And I think different organizations over time have developed their own different acronyms for their 5-point plans or their 4-point plans. But this one is ALGEE, ALGE, which it's not the greatest acronym ever, but it's valuable in terms of what's in there. And it's just, a mnemonic that you can use to remember. Hey, A is assess for risk of suicide or self-harm. L is about listening non-judgmentally. Once you've assessed and you've observed that somebody may be struggling. G is to give reassurance and information as best you can. And then E, the E's are encourage appropriate professional help, which is, comes with its own set of challenges. And then, there's another E for encourage self-help and other support strategies. So there's various sort of ways that we can learn to kind of navigate our own minds as they fluctuate between states of relative calm and the crisis that we can get ourselves into because of all the crap that life throws at us. But that's essentially the Mental Health First Aid program and their kind of action points. And then, like I said, there's different versions of similar approaches by private organizations and a couple other orgs out there in the world, but that's the one that I kind of gravitate to. think based on a guidebook that my friend Mike, that runs one of the skate parks back in Scotland, he'd got, because the skate park there is kind of affiliated with the local, the city council. Mm-hmm. So they'll have programs that are city ordinated that they work back with the National Health Service there. So they have like the professional work guides that come in and take people through the programs, and they're staff members at a city organization, so they have to be accredited and qualified. I got the guidebook from the NHS from him, and then did the course, the mental health first aid course for youth that you and I did together. Before that, I did the one for adults, as you might say, here in Portland at the Line for Life, the crisis center. And that's where I got the guidebook for the American version, which is pretty similar. Gotcha.
Yeah. And do you want to talk a little bit about like maybe what your impetus was for like bringing that to the skateboarding community specifically? Like, I mean, the folks that you have kind of brought into the training are a lot of like team managers, industry leaders, professional skaters, like why?
Yeah. I guess the reason for bringing the idea of mental health, self-care and awareness and, stigma reduction and all that to skateboarding, that's sort of just symptomatic and simply because I'm a skater and self-identify as a skateboarder and have for most of my life now. And so that's the community I feel most closely connected with. And that's the people I first and foremost would want to help outside my own family. Most of my friends, most of my close long-term friends I know through skating. So that's that. I'd wanted to do something to raise awareness and fundraise for some of the professional organizations working in that sector since my sister passed in 2011. She spoke about in the intro there. And then once I felt sort of capable mentally and had some tools, like the Just Giving platform didn't exist in 2011, I don't think. It's, there's certain like online tools that have come up since then that sort of make this type of activism, I guess, more accessible and doable and democratic, which is cool. But yeah, when I sort of started to piece it together and like, I should do something to raise some money, and I skate and I ride bikes, so let's just put all that together. And my cousin works at the Scottish Association of Mental Health, so there's an organization I'd like to work for, fundraise for initially. So that all just organically came together. And yeah, I'm a skater, so I wanted to do it within the context of skateboarding first, because it's somewhere to focus.
Definitely. Yeah. And, for folks that are not super familiar with the skate community, it's also, I'd say, important to note that like there have been a few skaters, recently that have died by suicide. And like one of them was a, closer friend of mine, Sean Modighetti from Seattle. And, Ben Ramers and Henry Gartland more recently. And yeah, so it's definitely something that we're not immune to as skaters. There's such an image of like us being like tough or whatever, or like something like that, or like immune to anything and we can do anything. And so much of skate culture has this ethos. And I kind of wanted to ask you, like, do you think there's anything inherently wrong with skate culture, or how it's sort of become a space of, some might call it like super macho or like toxic in a way, or people have described it in a lot of ways. Obviously, as a woman, I've experienced this on it, in a different regard, but I just wasn't sure like your thoughts on skate culture and how it may play into like mental health, the lack of support in mental health in the past, and how that might be changing.
Yeah, it's a hard question. And I can only really think through it, I guess, from my own point of view as, a white male who was pretty good at skateboarding. So that's a whole different experience to like, Kristin, like you said, as a female in skateboarding. And then, do you mean to ask in skate culture comparative to other youth subcultures or other sport cultures that there might be, or?
Yeah, I guess I just feel like, is there is there anything inherent to skate culture that you think would, potentially, be a space where there is more higher rates of suicide or lack of mental health inherently in skating? Or do you think there's really nothing different about like the skate community compared to like the greater community?
Yeah, I don't think that there's nothing different. I think that there's certainly some unique factors. I can't say for sure though. I don't know. It'd be awesome for some university cohort to get together and do some massive body of research on it. But intuitively, I think that, you get involved in skating because you don't feel like you fit into traditional or mainstream sports or whatever it may be, and you gravitate to skateboarding because of that. Yeah. I don't know if there's a higher instance of kids from like lower income households or broken households or whatever. There may or may not be. I couldn't say that for sure versus other sports or other subcultures. But to your point about the super macho type deal.
Yeah, I'm just thinking
there's a point about that, and then there's a point about kind of the party lifestyle that goes along with skating, and maybe like, hey, just have a beer, it's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, have a beer, like that doesn't help. Going skating can help as long as you're skating, and then that allows you to be mindful to a certain extent and stop the ruminating thoughts you may be having. As long as you're then processing what those thoughts are doing as well, you need both. I mean, we're maybe jumping ahead a little bit, but
yeah, totally.
Culture, yeah, the macho thing. But I hope and I think that that's starting to evolve and that's starting to change. When I see more articles coming up and I see it talked about on social media so much, and it's happening across the board, not just in skate culture either. So I think historically though, yes, I think that we weren't great at talking about it. Certainly on the male side. I don't know, in the female scene or the non-male scene in skating, I don't know if that was different from your point of view or if you...
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think people are a little bit more like open to that conversation per se. I just feel about skaters, it's like, you got to be like gnarly and go down a big handrail and like, you skated for like the company that really epitomized that zero, just big gnarly stuff, and I was just curious at your thoughts on like kind of being a part of that culture, if like, you felt like that was a safe space to talk about your feelings or definitely not, and yeah, I was just kind of curious about that. But
if we put it back to that context and I think about being on tour with the crew, I would say not. I wouldn't say definitely not by any means. And for a lot of the time I was, for a lot of the time I was on tour. Keegan would be there. We'd kind of more joke and laugh a lot than talk about emotional stuff. But I think that we could get deep.
Nice.
I don't know.
Well, it's good to know.
Yeah, it was never something that I feel was actively like discouraged to talk about. It's more you just didn't talk about it as much as maybe we should to be healthy. I don't know.
Gotcha.
That's maybe a symptom of the bigger cultural kind of vibes that there are around mental health rather than specific to skating. I mean,
totally. Yeah. And I don't know. I feel like at least as of lately, obviously the topic of mental health is like pretty big in skateboarding right now. We saw it at like the Pushing Borders conference. There's been like, the emergence of the Brandon Ramers Foundation, but also you started the Why So Sad campaign. And I don't know, we're skaters and I'm aware of it, but could you, just give a quick overview of like what the Why So Sad campaign is and all the different parts of it and what you're able to create?
Yeah, I mean, right now for the last couple of months, at least, it's been on the back burner a little bit from where I've been. But I guess that's what we were talking about earlier. I started. It's essentially a social media campaign to like raise a bit of money and raise some funds and have a dialogue about mental health and get people sort of thinking about it front of mind and understanding that it's okay to talk about it and recognizing that there's resources and you have a network of friends to the point we were just talking about, where if you're not sure you can talk about it, when you do, you find that people are open and receptive. I generally have.
Yeah.
And and if you meditate a little bit on it, you can kind of get a sense of who in your network is more approachable on the subject. Because I wouldn't say that everyone's comfortable with it. It is a tough subject to talk about. So
totally,
there's people out there to do it. But anyway, the point was, I started this campaign on this basis of eggplants, and the pun was the good egg, because it was about, raising money and doing something good for something. And then the pun became sad plants, because sad plants at first because of the word sad. And it's like, I'd been reading the work of Johann Hari quite a lot. He's a really kind of well-researched journalist, I think, by trade, who's written a lot on the subject of mental health, depression, the pharmaceutical approach, and then the various factors that kind of both social and biological that come, play into what results, the result that is our mental health and our emotional response to the world we live in. He's amazing. And his one thing he said at one point was that if people are expressing a sort of negative mental health state and they're going through some sort of crisis, often you can trace it back to some unresolved kind of trauma that's happened in their past. That same theme plays out in Richard Heckler's book, Waking Up Alive, which is about suicide survivors. And he was a counselor in the Bay Area for years. But the point being that it's the question. If you ask the question, "What's wrong with you?" it's kind of the wrong question. You should be asking what happened. What happened in the past to you that you haven't been able to process, that's now resulting and manifesting in this way. And so it's kind of a good way of just being really sharp about what's the question you need to be asking to solve the problem that we're trying to solve. And so that became, what's happened to you is like the simplest way of saying that is, why so sad? Like, why are you so sad? Think back, what happened? That's where it came from, really. And then it sort of sounds a bit flippant, but if you take it seriously, it's actually a serious question. So that became this, hey, well, let's sad plans and then sad grabs, and there's a play on words and some fun we can have in that, and skateboarding at the same time as trying to find a lighthearted way into a tough subject, basically. And that's that.
Totally.
And you on Instagram, and there's, people have submitted sad plans to me last year, and we made a video and a collage and did a board with reel that was awesome, raised some money, did an event, and made a video that lots of people got to watch and got their brains thinking about the subject, and hopefully kept the dialogue going and gave people some new ideas about how they can approach it and where they might get some help or different ways of thinking about their own mental health. And then we did sad grabs, and the sad grabs one, that's the one that's kind of like, I had it going for a second, and then I don't know if you've been into a situation like this in your life, Kristin, where you kind of hit a wall and you're like, I need to stop this for a while. I need to just focus. Like, I've got too much. And so kind of dealt with other stuff. And then I'm getting to the point now, especially now that the weather's starting to pick up and kind of work's starting to be sort of settled. I've got a good groove going on. But hey, this summer, I think maybe we pick that back up, especially if we can get back out and do in-person stuff. That was another thing that, took the wind out of the sails. It's this unclarity, lack of clarity of are we actually going to be able to go on a ride or meet at a skate park and have a thing where everyone does sad grabs over, the barbecue or whatever we want to do to have a bit of a fun event? And that kind of slowed me down. So,
yeah. I mean, it's hard to feel super inspired right now. I mean, if we're thinking about our mental health, that's awesome that you had that boundary. You're like, I just don't have the energy for this right now and have other stuff I got to take care of. And it's always okay to set something down and pick it back up when the vibe is there. So that's cool to know that, maybe there could be some more wind in the sails this summer if everything aligns.
So the sails are still there. I just need the wind will pick up again. Yeah,
the wind will pick up for sure. For folks that are listening that, don't skateboard, can you describe what a sad plant is, eggplant, sad grab? Because to me also, I'm a street skater, so I don't even know the difference between a sad plant and an eggplant, I don't think. So just gonna roast myself humbly.
Most of the youngsters that don't, and I realize that I'm kind of older every day when I talk about movies as if everyone's seen them, and it's there's kids that haven't seen RoboCop. It's crazy. And let's think. Eggplant is a hand plant. So if you go up a ramp and, you try to go inverted upside down, and you generally grab the rail of your board to hold it on your feet, and you plant one or the other hand down. Whichever hand is not grabbing the board, you'd plant down. So eggplant, you go up and this is difficult because you turn backside, which is another term that needs explained. So don't worry about it. You turn so that you're facing down into the ramp, grab with your trailing hand, the toe edge of your board. It depends if you wrap your arm around your leg, that's tuck knee. If you put your hand between your legs, that I guess is stink bug, I guess they call it. That's where these terms come from. I think a lot of these come from
probably teenagers.
No, these terms come from Teenage Lance Mountain and Neil Blender for the most part, I think.
Yes.
They invented most of these strange names. But and you plant your leading hand. So you kind of have to air into an eggplant. It's kind of scary that way. Ben Schroeder is one of the best at them. And then Lance has a really good one. So that was the good egg. And then sad plant, you grab with your leading hand and you plant your trailing hand. So it means that as your board's going up, you can plant your hand quicker. And what you have to do for a sad plant is really straighten out your front leg entirely. Lock that front knee if you can. You'll roll your back foot on the tail to make it look awesome. Jeff Grosso had one of the best ever. There's a picture of it that Bryce Knight shot in the video that we made. R.I.P. Jeff. And that's a sad plant. It's all about that straight front leg. And then there's the sad grab, which is the street version, which I think Nat has had a picture in Trans World shot by Grant Britton back in the day. And it's over the asphalt bank in one of the schoolyards. I think he's wearing his Public Enemy t-shirt. It's looking good. And he's in the sad grab. So he's grabbing behind his front leg with his leading hand, and he's straightening his front leg out. And that's the straight front leg is like the signature of a sad move. And then that got reinvented as the melon grab based on the word melancholy, which means sad, which I can imagine Blender being a word play kind of guy. Maybe, I don't know Neil very well, but he seems like he would play with words and be like, sad. It's like melancholy, melon grab. And then just
I never put that together. I was thinking like watermelon or something like that, or just like,
yeah, people think that. And then
but it's short for melancholy. Wow.
That caption on the Nat's picture is Ollie to sad air, aka melancholy. You can
sick.
Look up on Google. Just Google Natus Trans World Grant Britain or something. You'll see the picture. You can, if you see the one that's scanned from the Mac, you can zoom in and you can read the caption. Fun little activity to do.
Nice. If folks want to watch your Why So Sad campaign video where you're biking around and doing a bunch of sad plants and aerials and all that stuff, where can folks watch that video?
Thrasher put that up. So it's on Thrasher's YouTube channel. You can search Why So Sad Thrasher Magazine.
So sick. Awesome. So I was curious, if you had a magic wand, like what would you create in the skate community to better support mental health for all skateboarders? Clearly, like, that's your passion. That's your community. Like you could do anything. What would you do?
In infrastructure wise, or some sort of support system or something like that. I haven't got the answer yet. Like I think we spoke earlier about how like different brands and different orgs are doing stuff. They're doing stuff here and there, and there's not a consistent approach. So I feel like a consistent approach is good, because then over time, more and more people can kind of know what it is and know where to start. So I don't know what that looks like, but I imagine it would be a proper partnership with some formal organizations. So I don't know. I don't know, Kristin. I don't have the answer to that. I think that if there was access to information and people had a sticker or something, if they'd been through the mental health first aid training, and so you could know who was an approachable and safe person to speak to about your feelings, And people would remember when their brains get into that state that they can get into, where their brains are tricking themselves into thinking that there's no way out. I wish that more people could just remember that grain of light that is, hey, this is my brain, going malfunction right now. It can get better. I know it can get better because, thousands of people have been here and have made it through. And I can too. I'd like there to be a way that people could remember that more readily. Because
that's awesome.
Because we see it still happening, and it's like, doesn't need to. I don't believe.
Yeah, I think what you said was beautiful. I think the idea that, there'd be some way of knowing who was safe to talk to about your feelings and your thoughts, depression, anxieties, all of that. And that there's, access for everyone to take the mental health first aid training so that they know how to like serve their peers. So I honestly, it sounds like there wouldn't need to be some big organization, but it would operate more like in like AA or NA, where there's like sponsors and, you have folks that are there to support you. And because I think what's beautiful about skateboarding is the intergenerational community and the mentorship that naturally happens with folks that are teaching tricks and learning. And it's like, could we add mental health support as part of kind of what's naturally built into skating in that way, which kind of sounds like what you're describing. So
yeah, I think I agree with that. That would be, and then ideally, like there is no, I mean, when I say a safe person to talk to, that implies that some people are unsafe to talk to about it. I don't think that's what I'm saying either. It would be some people who are maybe not as equipped to, and to know, for somebody that's experiencing a crisis, to know that that's the case and know that it's okay that somebody is not ready, and don't take that as like, because what your brain can do is put that back on yourself, and then it's like some self-negative reinforcing thing that's sort of defusing that as well. As I don't know how to work that into the culture, but the more education and the more sort of talking that we do about it, hopefully propagate and stick.
Totally. Yeah. I got faith in the next generation. That's what I always say. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you if you had like a mentor or coach or anyone in your life that was like a really positive influence on you. Kind of thinking back to the training that we did with mental health first aid, this was one of the questions that we were asked initially, because that's, and for a lot of people, that X factor of having that person you can talk to sort of built in. But yeah, I was just curious, like if you had that in your life and if you wanted to share a little bit about that.
Yeah. And when I read that, when it was written down, when you shared the questions earlier, my head didn't immediately go to where it went when you just said it. And as soon as you were saying it, I was like, oh yeah, like what we were learning, which was super interesting, I thought. And as we were going around the room, or the Zoom room that we were on, it was like every single person talked about the person that ran the local skate shop or worked at the local skate shop. And I think it was the same for me. My friend Gary, who I'm still really close with from Glasgow, Scotland, was a mentor and a confidant and a help. He worked at NBC. Jamie Blair, that ran Clan Skates over the other side of Glasgow, was awesome and a mentor and helped me a lot. Jeff, Justin, that worked there. Other older friends. My friend Toby was a mentor and a positive influence and a help, and somebody I could talk to about this type of stuff. Andy as well. Andy went on to be a doctor and an anesthesiologist, and then Toby at the time he didn't run the skate shop, he ran the bargain bookstore, and now he's a pretty successful fine artist.
Nice.
But there's quite a number of people through skateboarding. Those are the ones that kind of stick out at me from those formative times when you're like late teens, early 20s, when your frontal cortex is still forming. Your brain hasn't fully developed at that point. And, not that life gets easier, but, it's a weird transitional time then.
Yeah. How did they show up for you, just as being like your friend, or do you have like any particular instance of like how they really like had your back or anything like that? Like just one example, I guess.
Oh man. Gary's got a good philosophical point of view on life. He's a little older than the crew. not too much, a couple of years older. So he had a little bit of perspective maybe sometimes. I don't know. I don't know if it's something we want to put in. There's one time we're out skating and we're walking somewhere in Glasgow, and one of a random small crew of kids is walking towards us, up to no good. I assume they were up to no good, because one of them just reached up, just like turned to me and spat a big bunch of spit right in my face as we were walking by.
No.
That is two things. And then he had a can of mace or whatever that he was like flashing. So they were like looking for a ruck basically. And you get really angry when somebody does that. And then as a young, macho tail dropping skater, you think that you're going to fight, but you're only 140 pounds and 5'7" or whatever. And it's probably not a good idea. But Gary was like, keep walking. He grabbed me. He was like, just keep walking. Let's keep going. And he said, his life is punishment enough. And I was like, that's a fair point. You have to think about the perspective, like what drove that kid to feel like he needed to do that to some random person in the street. What sort of shit is he going through at his home that makes him that angry, that's how he's sort of, responding to the world that he's living in. It's like, yeah, he's probably got worse things going on. So that was sort of the way that Gary would kind of put things in perspective was helpful.
Yeah, and just kind of like leading with compassion and stuff like that. Actually, when I was sharing about my mentor and in that same training space, that's like basically what I brought up too, is my mentor showed me how to think about things from a different perspective and to show compassion for other people above everything else and to not judge. And yeah, I think that's beautiful. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
It was exactly that. It was that, like, think about it from, put yourself in his shoes and think about that. So,
yeah. Cool. Yeah. So I was curious about like your personal like health and well-being, and like, mindfulness and being connected and being present is so important to mental health. In a day and age where there's so much screen time, so many distractions, so much stress, crazy stuff happening in the world. I just wanted to hear from you, like, what are your mindfulness tips, or what do you try to practice in your own life to stay healthy?
I ride my bike. I play my little frame drum and strum amateur guitar chords and make rhythms. Rhythms on the guitar and the drum is like really quite one of the best ways, I think, of being able to like focus your focus your attention so that your thoughts can just go away for a while. But then being able to actively do that is pretty interesting as well. I use the Headspace app a little bit, if you've heard of that one. There's a few different...
Same. Big Headspace user over here.
A few different ones. The Andy guy that kind of runs that's got pretty good amount of content in there and guided kind of meditation ideas. And he always grounds it in some practical sort of problem you're trying to solve, and then takes you through a little mindfulness sort of breathing exercise and focus and noting your thoughts and starting to get into the habit of recognizing what your brain does all the time. We get into these like repetitive habit thought patterns that can send you down emotional roads you just don't need to go down. Because it's a lot of what we think is just, it's kind of automatic, so it's kind of starting to recognize that that's just what your brain does, and it's not all thoughts that you need to respond to. But if you don't notice it happening, sometimes your body responds to it, and then you're feeling all anxious, and and it gets into a vicious cycle. So learning that mindfulness stuff a little bit. I'm not that great at it, but I practice it as much as I can. As soon as Kim actually earlier said the word mindfulness, I find myself like stopping and breathing in through my nose. I just did it naturally when I heard the word. Yes, we must be. Then you breathe in and you start to regulate your breathing. In through the nose is super important because of the structure of your sinuses, apparently, is like, it makes the air better, and it goes through all the little nuances of your sinuses and filters. And don't breathe through the mouth, breathe in through the nose.
Nice. I never knew, like I've done yoga for years. No one has ever explained to me why you breathe in through your nose. I was just like, well, I guess it's just what you do when you're a yogi or into meditation, but
it's just because it's better. So that mindfulness, drumming a little bit and guitar is helpful. Skating to a certain extent when I can get skating and sort of have a decent session.
Mm-hmm.
But like we were saying earlier, like all of those things are great as long as you're sort of like also learning to notice what your thoughts are doing when your thoughts are rattling on and doing their things that can be positive or negative.
Yeah. One thing my therapist, just on that same topic, one thing my therapist had me do was write a note in my phone to remind myself who I am. What are the things I like about myself?
Oh.
Am I a nice person? Am I kind? Am I inclusive? I wrote down all the things that I am, because when I am having doubt, self-doubt, or that kind of that spinning thought, and I'm all whipped up in my emotions and feeling really negative, if I read that, it honestly is like a reset. I'm like, oh yeah, like I'm not this horrible, awful person that doesn't deserve to exist in this world. I actually have a lot of purpose. There's a lot of, I do a lot of good in this world and I'm important, but it's so true. Your brain can ride off the rails pretty easily if you're not doing so hot. So yeah, that's a really good point. And I just wanted to share that.
That's awesome. Did she have you write down goals that you have when you're in a good mind state? Write down your goals as well so that you can remember, oh yeah, I have things to get done, I have things to live for.
Oh, for sure. I mean, for me, the goal setting aspect is never an issue with me. I'm such an overachiever. It's more just what my achievements are rooted in. Are they rooted in a personal desire, or is it from a people pleaser? I have to do this for other people, that type of role. And that is where I can get into a lot of trouble, because if I make my whole life about pleasing other people, I'm never serving myself, and there is a conflict internally. So for me, I try to make it less about goals and achieving and more, because that's what I naturally do. And I feel a lot of pressure to do. So my goal with my wellness is to do less and to be more present, more generally. Yeah. So
that's a good goal too.
Yeah. I got to slow down. I'm on that end of the spectrum.
Absolutely. No, I'm with you. I tend to drive pretty hard and I will burn myself out. And that's kind of part of what we were saying earlier. Like I needed to chill for a little while, and the Why So Sad thing will pick up again, and hopefully we'll have some fun with it and raise some money and awareness this summer maybe. But
totally. I mean, if you're running an organization about, regarding mental health, you gotta take care of yourself. So way to lead by example.
Put your own oxygen mask on first, as they say.
Yeah, exactly. You got to take care of yourself. Awesome. Well, thanks, John, again for joining us today. This was an awesome chat about mental health and how you've brought a lot of the conversation around mental health to skateboarding, but also resources and support. So thank you for doing what you do. Super stoked to see what you create in the summer with Why So Sad.
This podcast was brought to you by Skate Like a Girl and the Center for Sport and Social Justice at Cal State University East Bay. It was produced by MaKenna Duda, Kim Woozy, and Kristin Ebeling. The music is by Marby Miller. A big thank you to Dr. Matthew Atencio and Dr. Missy Wright for their support.